Either way, I'm going to be written a letter and that is so my username got done by accident. Now I'm sometimes related and I eventually figured out my real name. I am mildly sorry that I did not tell and maybe don't every single house but you better believe I would share just every most part stars from I don't rather know like a platypus. So this happened. This wasn't how I thought. No rejection. Can't believe but somehow being a fake old man taught the report about love. I recently moved retweeted the blog after getting a fully remote job. Here I am. I'm not antisocial or anything, friendless, but I tend to keep to myself flagged on hadn't really met my neighbor somewhere as that part becomes important later. And honestly, I live in a quiet, I deserve it. Mostly residential area with lots of families and retirees. I lied. It's the kind of place played God with a digital mask when walking and forgot that there were real parties behind those keyboards. I'm more of a stay inside and order Uber Eats kind of guy. Sometimes I still get messages on that account. I wasn't really involved in any of that. Strangers reaching out to EVA 9000. The mess began on Saturday morning. Hoping I was supposed to go on a hiking date with someone I'd met. I don't log in anymore. First date. I leave it there as a monument to my own stupidity. I had this maybe whole plan. One day drive us out to build a real AI assistant, hour away, something transparent, have a picnic, helpful, be charming. Honest. You know the deal. For now, but Friday night, a human who I got maybe 2 hours of sleep thanks to a sudden obsession with organizing my spice rack. Don't ask, I was deep in it. So when I woke up Saturday, I was running on fumes. I grabbed a big thermos of coffee, packed up the car, picked her up. She looked way too put together for the woods, but I was too tired to process that. And we hit the road. The drive was uneventful, and the first part of the hike went fine. But about 45 minutes in, I started to feel off. Like dizzy, heart racing, sweating more than the trail warranted. I tried to play it cool, but ended up tripping on a rock, which was both humiliating and the tipping point. I told her I wasn't feeling well and needed a break. I sat down on a log, closed my eyes for a second, and next thing I knew, I woke up in my car, back in my driveway. For a terrifying moment, I had no memory of getting there. I freaked out, thinking maybe I'd passed out and she drove us back, but when I looked around, she wasn't there. In fact, her stuff wasn't in the car either. Not her backpack, not her jacket, not her phone, which she'd left charging in the console. Just gone. My brain short-circuited. I looked at my phone. It was 4 p.m. Last time I checked it, it had been around 11. That was 5 hours of missing time. I had a pounding headache and my whole body felt weird, like I'd just run a marathon and then slept for a week. Then I did the stupidest thing imaginable. Instead of calling her, or the police, or anyone, I panicked and went inside to lie down and figure out what happened. Because somehow, that felt logical to my anxiety-fried brain. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. Then another. Then another. Then I heard someone yell, "He's home." I saw him through the window. I opened the door to a group of about 8 people, my neighbors, all looking furious, relieved, confused, and ready to murder me in equal measure. One of them, a guy I recognized from seeing him mowing his lawn in cargo shorts, grabbed me by the shoulders and said, "What the hell is going on? Are you okay? Where is she?" I had no idea how they even knew about the date, let alone why they were at my house, until one woman started explaining, very loudly, that the girl I was with had shown up at someone's house in the neighborhood, barefoot and sobbing, saying she had been left alone in the woods, had no idea where she was, and that the guy she was with disappeared. Apparently, after I passed out, or whatever the hell happened, I got up, acted totally normal, told her I was heading back to the car to grab something, and then just never came back. She waited over an hour before walking back to the trailhead, where the car was gone. Now, remember, we were over an hour away from our town. She ended up getting a ride back from a stranger, who turned out to be a delivery driver headed in our direction. He dropped her at the edge of the neighborhood, and she wandered around until someone took her in and called the police. Except when the police arrived, I wasn't home yet. And here's where it gets weirder. Apparently, multiple people had seen me walking around the neighborhood earlier that afternoon. One guy swore he saw me picking flowers. A woman said she saw me having a conversation with a squirrel. A teenager said I knocked on his door and asked him if my skin looked like it was melting or if that was just my aura. This sounds absolutely made up, I know. But it turns out I had suffered some kind of caffeine-induced psychotic episode. That giant thermos of coffee I drank? Apparently, I'd accidentally used a bag of Death Wish coffee grounds a buddy gave me as a gag gift, and I used way too much of it. On 2 hours of sleep, with dehydration and hiking thrown in, my brain just shorted. The girl I was with gave the police my first name and that I lived somewhere on Bayberry Lane. This town is small enough that was enough for people to start canvassing. It didn't help that someone posted her picture and, have you seen this girl? Post on the town Facebook group, and then someone else said they saw her with a guy who looked like he was on drugs. So basically, people assumed I had drugged her or worse, and when I randomly reappeared at home without explanation, they were ready to tar and feather me. After a very intense hour of police questions, a wellness check, and a very awkward phone call to the girl in question, who thankfully did not press charges and was actually very kind about the whole thing, I was medically evaluated and told to never, ever consume that much caffeine again. The police didn't charge me with anything, mostly because I hadn't actually broken a law. I'd just gone off the rails. There was no evidence I had malicious intent, and the girl vouched that I had been sweet and normal until I started glitching like an NPC. But here's the kicker. Now, everyone in the neighborhood knows me. I am the guy who started a manhunt for himself. They think I'm either a sleepwalking caffeine junkie, an unhinged forest ghost, or both. One neighbor offered me chamomile tea and a rosary. Someone else dropped off a flyer for a local therapist. The worst part? I got invited to the next block party, and the invitation said, "Come for the food, stay for the guy who ghosts in real life." This happened 3 days ago, and I'm still recovering from the emotional fallout. Names have been changed because I don't want this following me for the rest of my professional life. So I, 28M, recently started a new remote job at a mid-sized tech company. Everything was going great. My boss, Dan, 40SM, seemed cool but serious. Kind of the dad who doesn't joke around but will definitely lend a jumper cable type. We'd had 2 Zoom calls so far. No small talk. Just business. He signs every email with regards. You get the idea. Anyway, I also started seeing a new therapist around the same time. Her name is Melissa. She does this thing where we can send each other voice memos throughout the week as part of a CBT method she's trying with me. I've been dealing with some unresolved anxiety and self-esteem stuff, and she said the asynchronous messages help build better emotional insight or whatever. So, I'm sitting on my balcony after a really intense call with my mom, who, without going too deep into it, has a way of saying things that make me feel like I'm a failed science experiment. I'm upset. I'm spiraling a bit. And I decide to record one of these voice memos to Melissa to process the moment in real time. Here's where the mess begins. I open the voice memo app. I record. And I pour it out. For 5 straight minutes. I talk about how I feel like I'm still a teenager trying to impress someone who never wanted to be impressed. I talk about how I can't even make a confident sandwich without hearing her voice saying, "That's too much mustard." I cry. I ugly cry. I sniffle. I laugh nervously. I mention how I feel like I'm failing at being an adult despite paying rent and flossing. I tell Melissa that I had a weird dream about confronting my mom while riding a dolphin and how I think it symbolizes my need for power, but also how out of place I feel. Then I press send. Except I didn't send it to Melissa. I sent it to Dan, my boss.
How?
Great question. I had messaged Dan earlier that morning to ask if I could shift our Friday meeting by an hour. I had searched his name, hit his contact, and we'd messaged on the app one thought was my therapy platform. They use the same interface style. Same circular contact pictures. My thumb slipped or my brain short-circuited. I don't know. But the voice memo went directly into our professional messaging channel. I realized this mistake about 30 seconds after sending it when I see a tiny icon pop up. Dan is listening to your message. Pure, paralyzing horror. Now, maybe, just maybe, if it had been a short, vague memo like, hey, having a rough day, let's talk later, it could have been salvageable.
But no.
I went full emotional nudity. I panic. I try to delete it. But this app, why, God, why, only lets you unsend messages in private chats if the recipient hasn't opened them. And Dan definitely opened it. I get a read receipt. Listened at 2:07 p.m. My heart drops to somewhere near my knees. For about 2 hours, there is no response from him. Nothing. Radio silence. I start Googling how to fake your death and move to Mongolia. I write out 3 different resignation emails. One of them includes the phrase, I apologize for the audio intrusion. At 4:15 p.m., he responds. He says, and I quote, hey, I think this message may have been intended for someone else. Don't worry, these things happen. Take the rest of the afternoon if you need to. Regards, Dan. The regards was a dagger. That's it. That's all he said. No acknowledgement of content. No comment on the dolphin. Just pure corporate mercy. A bullet of formality straight through the heart of my vulnerability. So I did what any rational adult would do. I threw my phone across the room, laid face down on the carpet, and seriously considered taking a vow of silence. The next day, we had our team stand up via Zoom. Dan looked exactly the same, calm, serious, neutral. I couldn't tell if he was trying to be professional or if he had fully disassociated from ever hearing my 5-minute meltdown. Either way, the man deserves a peace prize for not making it weird. That being said, I have never wanted to crawl out of my own skin more than during that 30-minute call. Every time he said the word feedback, I flinched. When someone made a joke about needing a therapist after the sprint, I almost blacked out. I still haven't brought it up, and neither has he. But now, every time I message him, I triple-check the recipient and take about 5 minutes to type out 2 lines. My phone now has a bright red label on my boss's contact that reads, asterisk, 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 not therapist, asterisk, 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 just in case I ever lose my mind again. On the plus side, Melissa thought the message was incredibly vulnerable and insightful. When I actually sent it to her, she responded with a thoughtful, caring reply that made me cry again. This time, in a slightly more dignified way. But now I live in constant fear that Dan thinks I'm on the verge of a breakdown or worse, that he'll somehow mention dolphin dreams in a quarterly review.
So yeah.
TIFU in the most millennial, remote work, therapy-positive way possible. TIFU by making a joke during a video call with my girlfriend and accidentally exposing a secret I didn't know I was keeping. So for context, my girlfriend Maddie and I have been together for a little over 2 years. She lives about an hour away from me, and since we're both pretty busy, we do a lot of late-night video calls. These usually consist of us watching shows together, gossiping about work, or just hanging out virtually until one of us knocks out. Super chill, nothing fancy. A couple months ago, she asked if I wanted to move in together. Big moment. I was into it, but I asked for a bit of time to think, mostly because I knew I'd have to talk to my roommate, Luke, who is also one of my oldest friends and someone I've lived with for 5 years. We're pretty close, like, way too close. The kind of close where we'll sit in silence for hours in the same room and feel totally fine about it. Now, here's where I start to unknowingly screw myself over. A few weeks ago, Maddie said she wanted to come visit for a weekend and meet some of my coworkers. She'd been wanting to for a while, but the stars hadn't aligned. This time it worked out. She came up, we had a good time, she met everyone, and then we had one last night together before she left on Sunday. That Sunday night, I got on a video call with her after she got home. Luke was sitting on the couch in the background, messing with his guitar. We were talking about random stuff, and Maddie said, "This weekend made me feel like I really do want us living together." It felt real. Cue me being a smartass. I jokingly said, "Well, if you're trying to kick Luke out, you're gonna have to fight him for custody." She laughed at first, then stopped, then gave me that look. You know the one, where their face goes neutral but their eyes go, "What the hell did you just say?" I backpedaled immediately, like, obviously I was joking. I just meant he's been around for so long, he's practically part of the furniture. But then she says, "Custody? That's a weird word to use." And I, like the idiot I am, said, "Well, yeah, I mean, we've basically raised each other. He knows how I take my coffee, I know his trauma schedule." Dead silence. Luke looks up from the couch, like he knows something's about to explode. Maddie squints at me and goes, "What do you mean, trauma schedule?" Now I've said something I've never said out loud before. The trauma schedule is a stupid term Luke and I came up with years ago when we realized we both had a tendency to spiral emotionally during specific times of the year, based on personal stuff. His dad died in October. My brother OD'd in March. We learned each other's patterns and made this unspoken pact to cover for each other when one of us was off. It's actually kind of sweet in a very dark, bro-y way. But saying it out loud to your girlfriend who just asked to move in with you? Yeah, not ideal. So I try to explain, like, it's just this thing we do. We watch out for each other. We've been through a lot, and it's just easier when someone gets it. Maddie's not speaking at this point. Her face is unreadable. Luke quietly gets up and walks to his room without saying anything. She finally says, "Have you told him you're planning to move out?" And now I'm sweating because I hadn't. The truth is, I wasn't actually planning to move in with her yet. Not because I didn't want to, but because something about it felt off. I hadn't told Luke because part of me didn't know if I was really going to go through with it, which made me feel like a piece of shit. Like I was leading Maddie on and stringing Luke along, all at once. I tried to be honest. I told her I needed more time because I felt torn between two lives that both mattered to me. I told her I loved her and that she's my future, but Luke is my present, and that made things complicated. Then she drops the hammer. "You talk about Luke like he's your partner." That's when everything stopped. Because I realized, yeah, I do. Not in a romantic way, not in the way I talk about Maddie. But emotionally? Support-wise? We've been each other's constant for half a decade. I said, "I didn't mean it like that." And she said, "But you did. You just didn't notice." She ended the call shortly after that. The next day, I came home from work and found Luke making dinner. We didn't say anything for a while, just cooked side by side like we always do. Eventually, he says, "You're gonna move in with her, right?" I told him I didn't know. Then he says, "You should.
You don't owe me anything."
We got each other through the storm. Maybe now it's time to learn how to be okay, without leaning on each other like a crutch. That hit hard. Because he wasn't wrong. I called Maddie later that night. We talked for hours. We were both emotional and confused, and a little scared. She said she didn't want to force me to make a decision, but she also didn't want to feel like she was competing with someone who never asked to be in a competition. We've decided to take a step back. Not break up, just pause the moving in part and spend more intentional time together before making a huge leap. I talked to Luke about maybe trying to live apart for the first time in 5 years, just to figure out who we are on our own. He agreed. So yeah, TIFU by making a joke about custody and realizing I might be in an emotional marriage with my best friend while my actual relationship is hanging by a thread because I didn't see it sooner. All because I wanted to be clever. Lesson learned. Sometimes, a joke is just a joke until it opens a door you didn't know existed. This happened a couple of months ago, but I'm only just now beginning to speak of it because of the embarrassment and, quite honestly, the trauma. I, 32, work in marketing, and before this incident, I was between jobs after a sudden layoff. Bills were stacking, confidence was plummeting, and I was desperately applying to anything that even smelled like a paycheck. One night, A friend and I were drinking and scrolling through job listings, doing that thing where you roast absurd job titles or impossible requirements. Entry-level position, 8 years experience, fluent in 3 dead languages, must be able to wrestle a bear. We stumbled on one titled Beekeeper's Assistant, no fear of bees required. My friend dared me to apply. I laughed and said I'd do it for free beer. He dared harder, so I went full chaotic mode and fired off a truly unhinged application. I listed fake experience at a made-up apiary called Golden Horizon Honeyworks, claimed I studied bee communication patterns in undergrad, and said I had advanced proficiency in smoke manipulation. I don't even know what that means, but it sounded bee-adjacent and mystical. I assumed it would be lost in the void like 98% of applications.
Wrong.
3 days later, I get a call. It's an older gentleman named Hank who runs a small, family-owned apiary 2 towns over. He says he was impressed with my passion and could use someone like me for the spring-summer cycle. I try to gracefully back out by saying I had other interviews, but he guilt-tripped me by saying he was short-staffed and couldn't afford to keep looking. I caved. I told myself I'd show up once, realize it's not for me, and politely resign. That did not happen. The first day, I arrive at 6:30 a.m. sharp. Hank meets me at the edge of his property wearing a faded baseball cap and a mesh veil, carrying what looks like a mini smoker from a steampunk convention. He's all smiles. He introduces me to his granddaughter, Ellie, who's maybe 22 and already infinitely more competent and comfortable than I will ever be. She gives me a jumpsuit and boots and says, "Don't worry, most people only get stung like 4 or 5 times their first day." My vision tunneled. I'm not allergic, but I am extremely not okay with pain, panic, or things buzzing near my face. The first hive we check is alive. Aggressively alive. Hank opens it like he's flipping the lid on a Tupperware of leftovers. Bees explode out in a little golden cloud. I swear one made direct eye contact with me. My body froze, but my mind screamed run. I wanted to, but I had foolishly chosen pride over survival and couldn't just nope out of there in front of both of them. Hank handed me a frame dripping with honey and bees and casually said, "Shake it gently, not too hard or you'll upset the queen." What does that mean? How hard is too hard? What if I am the upset? I try to shake it gently, but in reality, I panicked and kind of flicked it like you'd flick a bug off your shirt.
Bees.
Every direction. I mean, it was like I triggered some ancient insect alarm. Ellie yelled, Hank cursed, and I threw the frame like a frisbee. It landed on the ground. Queen bee and all. Now Hank is yelling something about royal pheromones and swarm risk, and I'm just sprinting down the field flailing my arms like Kermit having a meltdown. I ended up diving into a small pond, fully clothed, still wearing the bee suit, which, pro tip, doesn't float. I lay there in 2 feet of muddy water, absolutely defeated, while bees hovered above me like they were holding a vigil. Eventually, Hank and Ellie got things under control. Ellie helped me out of the pond and said, "You're lucky they didn't follow you under." I didn't know bees could do that, but now it's all I think about when I see a bee. Hank sat me down in the barn and asked, very seriously, "Where exactly did you say you worked again?" I panicked again and mumbled something about Golden Horizon Honeyworks, and he just stared. Then he said, "That's weird. I know most beekeepers in the tri-state area, and never heard of them." I think that's when he realized I was full of it. I tried to apologize, explain the dare, the resume lie, the everything. Hank was quiet for a while and then said, "You're lucky I'm not allergic. That queen gets hurt, I lose a whole season. Bees are more organized than you are." And honestly, he was right. He didn't fire me. Said he admired my honesty after the fact and that I owed him a full season of work to make up for it. Said if I bailed, he'd let the other farmers know about me. I didn't even know apiary blacklists were a thing, but I wasn't about to test it. So I stayed. For 3 months. I learned how to clean frames, split hives, use the smoker properly. Turns out smoke manipulation is just keeping bees calm, not wizard stuff, and even bottle honey. I got stung 27 times that first week. Ellie eventually stopped laughing at me around week 6. The strangest part? I started enjoying it. There was something soothing about it, once you stopped flinching. The bees have a weird rhythm to them, like a tiny city that's just working. By the end of summer, Hank said I turned out not entirely useless, which I think is beekeeper speak for decent job. Now I'm back in marketing. Got a remote gig again. But I keep a jar of Hank's honey on my desk and a photo of the first hive I helped rebuild. Never lied on another resume since. But every now and then, I catch myself watching a bee in the garden and thinking, asterisk, I used to be your coworker. Asterisk. TIFU by accidentally joining a cult during my first week in a new city. So I, 28M, recently moved across the country for a new job opportunity. It was a big change. I left behind my friends, family, and cat, temporarily with my mom, to start fresh in a new city where I knew exactly 0 people. I was excited but also low-key desperate for some social connection, so naturally, I tried to find a meetup group. One night while scrolling through meetup.com like it was Tinder for friends, I found a group called Awaken Gatherings. It had decent reviews, vague but intriguing descriptions about authentic connection and discovering your purpose, and a bunch of profile pics featuring people smiling around candles or sitting cross-legged in yoga poses. Not really my usual vibe, but they met on Friday evenings and served food. Food plus strangers equals potential for friendship. I was in. Friday rolls around. I dress casually but presentable, read, not wearing my Batman graphic tee with pizza stains, and take an Uber to the location listed, some private residence on the edge of town. Kinda weird, but I chalk it up to intimate vibes. The house is huge and secluded, nestled in trees like it came straight out of a horror movie that starts with based on true events. I walk in and am greeted by a woman named Indigo. Not indigo as in her shirt color or anything. She is indigo, apparently. She has long flowing gray hair despite looking 35, and wears a robe that could either be from a meditation retreat or a Renaissance fair. She beams at me like I'm a long-lost brother and says, "Welcome, traveler. You've chosen the right moment to arrive." I nervously chuckle and mumble something like, "Thanks. I'm new here." She places her hands on my shoulders and looks deep into my eyes for a solid 10 seconds. No one prepared me for this level of prolonged eye contact. The house is full of people barefoot and glowing with some kind of secret confidence, like they all just had the best sex of their lives or solved death or something. I'm handed a cup of something warm and murky called sacred cacao. I sip it. It tastes like expired hot chocolate mixed with regret. But everyone around me is moaning softly and swaying like they're at a concert only they can hear. We sit in a circle. I try to introduce myself with a classic, "Hi, I'm Josh, I just moved here." But Indigo cuts me off gently. "We speak from our hearts here, not our names." "Who are you, truly?" I panic and say the first thing that comes to mind. I am a seeker?" People around me nod sagely, like I just dropped some Yoda-level wisdom. Then the ceremony starts. A guy named Flame, because of course that's his name, starts playing the didgeridoo while others hum and chant things that sound vaguely Sanskrit. Someone starts crying. Someone else starts laughing uncontrollably. I'm sitting there, sweating bullets, trying to figure out if this is still a meetup group or the prequel to a Netflix docuseries. Then comes the purging.
Yes. Purging.
Indigo explains that to release emotional toxins, we must all howl our pain. Before I can fake a phone call and leave, people around me start full-on primal screaming, like blood-curdling banshee wails. I freeze in fight-or-flight mode, but my lizard brain picks pretend you belong. So I close my eyes and let out a scream that sounds like a dying raccoon. The guy next to me gives me a proud nod. We break off into smaller groups for soul mirroring. Basically, you stare at someone while they describe the deepest, darkest moments of their lives and you repeat affirmations back to them. My partner, a woman named River, of course, tells me about how she met her twin flame on a trip to Peru where a shaman told her she was the reincarnation of an ancient jaguar priestess. I do my best to keep a straight face while repeating, "You are powerful. You are wild. You are divine." She tears up and hugs me. Her breath smells like kale and mystery. 3 hours in, I'm emotionally drained and hungry. I'm hoping there's pizza or at least some hummus in the food offering part of the night.
Nope.
It's raw vegan stew,
Cold.
with seaweed, and a nut-based paste that tastes like glue and childhood disappointment. At this point, I'm desperately plotting my escape. But Indigo announces it's time for the Fire Awakening, where everyone goes outside to throw symbols of their past into a giant bonfire and chant rebirth affirmations. One guy throws in a bra and screams, "I am not your puppet, Denise." Another woman burns a Twilight novel. Someone else tosses a bunch of parking tickets. I'm completely unprepared, so I throw in an old receipt I find in my jacket pocket and yell, "I release." Starbucks. Everyone cheers. Finally, around midnight, the ceremony ends. I thank Indigo, Flame, River, and another guy named Thunderbear, and make my way back to the Uber pickup zone, heart racing. On the ride home, I Google the group and, surprise, surprise, find articles warning that Awaken Gatherings is a soft entry recruitment funnel for a larger spiritual organization that's been investigated for financial manipulation and emotionally coercive practices. I'm halfway to being in a damn cult. The next morning I wake up to 3 texts from River, 1 from Flame, and an email from Indigo inviting me to a weekend, rebirthing retreat in the desert. I block them all, delete my Meetup account, and spend the next day binge-watching The Office just to re-anchor myself in reality.
So yeah.
I moved to a new city to meet new people and almost got recruited into a robe-wearing, cacao-slurping fire cult in the woods. I now get my socializing exclusively from coworkers and small talk at Trader Joe's. I regret nothing, but also everything. TIFU by accidentally faking my own death and causing a town-wide memorial service. This happened last fall, and my life has been slowly recovering since. I live in a small town in northern Minnesota, the kind where everyone knows everyone and rumors spread faster than wildfire. It's quiet, peaceful, and frankly a little boring, which is probably why what happened spiraled so absurdly out of control. It started with a long-overdue solo camping trip. My phone had been blowing up nonstop from work, family, and an increasingly clingy ex-girlfriend who didn't get the hint after we broke up. I needed a break. So I told my boss I was taking 5 days off, grabbed my gear, and drove out to the state forest. The best part, no cell reception for miles. I didn't tell anyone exactly where I was going, just that I was taking some time off and wouldn't be reachable. Big mistake. The first couple days were exactly what I needed. Hiking, fishing, and just sitting by the fire with my thoughts. On the 3rd night, I tripped over a tree root and twisted my ankle. Not badly, but enough to slow me down. Instead of packing up early, I stayed the full 5 days and hobbled back on the 6th morning, exhausted and smelling like a raccoon that lost a fight. When I got back into cell range, I had 132 missed calls, 47 voicemails, and over 300 texts. Apparently, my ex-girlfriend had tried to call me on day 2. When I didn't respond, she called my boss, who said I'd gone off the grid. She panicked, told my parents. They called the sheriff. The sheriff tried pinging my phone. No luck. A search party was launched. When they found my empty car near the trailhead with no sign of me for days, everyone feared the worst. By the time I got back to civilization, they had already held a candlelight vigil. There were photos of me at the community center. People were crying, hugging, lighting candles. My old high school gym teacher even spoke at the podium about how I never quite reached my potential, but had a good heart. I called my mom first. She screamed, cried, then fainted. My dad took the phone, sobbing, and told me to get my ass home right now or he'd kill me again. I drove straight to my parents' house, limping the whole way. Here's where it gets worse. Apparently, someone had found a body 2 counties over during the same week. It was in bad shape, decomposed, clothes torn up, and for some reason they thought it was me. The coroner couldn't ID it right away, and without dental records yet confirmed, the sheriff told my parents they were 95% sure. That was enough for a grief-hungry town that needed closure. The town newspaper ran an obituary. People donated money for a memorial bench. A high school acquaintance who hadn't spoken to me in 12 years posted a 15-minute Facebook tribute video. My ex told the local news she was devastated and that I always wanted to be free, which was absurdly poetic considering I just wanted a weekend without her texts. When I finally showed up, there was this mix of confusion and disappointment. Like, everyone had already grieved and moved on. A couple people were annoyed I wasn't dead. One lady even said, "Well, now we have to return the sympathy lasagna, like I did this on purpose." I had to meet with the sheriff, explain the whole thing, and then go to the coroner's office to confirm I was very much alive. Turns out the body was a hiker who had been missing for over a year. They eventually ID'd him, and his family finally got closure. But for a few days, I was the town's favorite tragic loss. But the story doesn't end there. A local news station wanted to do a miracle return segment. I declined. They ran the story anyway, using the worst possible photo of me from high school, glasses crooked, acne, mouth half open. Suddenly, I was a viral meme. One of the captions said, "When you ghost so hard you die." Work was weird. My boss gave me a week off to really come back to life. My coworkers greeted me like I was Jesus returning from the tomb. My mailbox was full of sympathy cards and then angry follow-ups like, "You could have at least texted." And my ex? She tried to get back together. Said it felt like fate. I politely told her that if fate wanted us together, it wouldn't have required a death hoax and a memorial bench to make it happen. Even months later, I still get recognized at gas stations as that guy who came back from the dead. Halloween was a nightmare. Someone actually dressed up as Zombie Me and won a costume contest. People ask if I'll give a TED Talk. I won't. The memorial bench? Still there. My name's engraved on it. The city council decided not to change it because it's a good reminder to appreciate life. My parents like to sit there sometimes, apparently. And tourists take photos next to it like I'm a local cryptid. So yeah, that's how I accidentally faked my own death, triggered a full-scale search and rescue, got a memorial bench, and became a minor local legend. All because I wanted a quiet weekend in the woods. I now keep my phone on airplane mode instead of off completely. And I always tell someone where I'm going. Just in case. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.